Thanks for your patience. Thanks everyone for organising this and for inviting me to come along today. And thanks to all the speakers so far. It's been really interesting, and I'm learning a lot. And I've been madly rewriting my talk based on what people have been saying. So yeah, basically I'm going to take a slightly different tack. I'm going to just talk about the sort of workflow that I do to generate new targets and new prospects, and to pick up ground for the company I've been working for a while, which is Geology Metals. And yeah, it's particularly relevant to the northeast Queensland, where we've been looking at base metals and gold and silver targets in the area sort of south of Kidston, between Kidston and sort of out towards Woolgar, which is still part of Georgetown and still kind of fits into the northeast Queensland concept just. Okay, there's just a quick disclaimer. We're not saying anything that's particularly sensitive, but if I do say something, don't take it with a grain of salt. Essentially what I'm going to be talking about today is desktop geology and geophysics, and you know, what you can do with you know, a modern GIS package without spending a cent. But please donate to QGIS, even though it's free. It's a fantastic tool, but they do have costs, and chipping a bit of money in is always good. Okay, so I'm basically going to talk about the concept of an explorer's stack, which is, you know, really thinking about the layers of information or the catalog of information that you can access at a you know, desktop level, but you can leverage, you know, access to the internet and fast download speeds and get amazing amounts of data, and some of it's live coming in on the web on some open web service, and some of it's a data set that might be up to sort of 60 gig and you have to store it on your PC or whatever. But there's a tremendous amount of data out there, and I'm only going to touch on a few of these sources, but the things I like to use, Geoscience Australia's gravity image of Australia is pretty good. They've got a smooth DEM product, which is about probably 30 gig to download, but it's really nice, clean DEM data to use. Barest Earth, if you like looking at spectral stuff, is great. I'm really happy with the Sentinel-2 stuff. Landsat has been good, but again, when you're starting to map at the tenement scale, it's a bit coarse. It's all right for sort of regional generation. Ozchem is one of these programs that's been, I guess, pushed off people's consciousness, pushed out of the front of their mind, but it's fantastic data. And if you want to look at lithogeochem, major elements and trace elements, it's a fantastic data set, well curated, and gives you a great baseline when you're going into areas and looking at, you know, what is background, basically. The National Soils Catchment Survey is also really interesting. AusAEM is fantastic. I'll be touching on that a bit later. Obviously, on the state level, tapping into the GSQ data portals, GRS Globe and QSpatial, there's a whole lot of resources that you can go through there. Historical tenement overlay, it's always interesting to look at who's had your ground before you have. The special projects, all the old Amira stuff. I wish there was more new Amira stuff. CSIRO does some really interesting things, particularly in this part of the world. There's a whole lot of hyperspectral surveys, very interesting. Obviously tap into university theses, and then, you know, really drilling down into the open file data, which is a massive resource, hard to penetrate, but there's some great nuggets and treasure to be found in old reports if you have the time to go through them. So, you know, it's nice to think that you could take all this data and basically have a stack and just do a sort of weights of evidence on each individual thing, and out the bottom you get the answer. In reality, we're trying to find something. We're starting broad and narrowing down. That's all good, but again, you're really not going to find one thing. You're going to find lots of things, and it's going to be a sort of a multi-step process of narrowing down and generating a whole lot of targets. And when you actually go, great, I've got all these targets, they stack up in lots of ways, we want to go and do a bit more work, most of them won't turn out to be that good. But again, it's sort of an old adage, if you're a songwriter and you've got 1,000 songs that are rubbish, you're actually a pretty good songwriter. So if you just keep plugging away at it, eventually you'll find something that isn't a false positive, that isn't a dud. Yeah, in reality, I think the best way to do this is to iterate. So you go through this process, you fiddle your way through the data, you know, work through the stack and work up some ideas, have conceptual models, test them, and then go back up the stack in various ways, and always go back up to the high level data and see how that links in. So it's a really iterative, integrated process where you're always adapting your thinking, and some of that is what I'll kind of touch on today. Okay, so just a bit of an introduction to Yarraman Metals. We started the company in late 2020. We've got just under 2,000 square kilometres of ground focused along the Kidston-Woolgar corridor, which is somewhat relevant to what other people have been talking about today. Just for your information, I don't know, can everyone see my cursor if I'm waving it around? Or do I need to turn on a laser pointer somehow?
Yeah, I can see it. It'll be easier if you turn on a laser pointer now.
How do I do that?
Go back to the right click.
Yeah, go right click, pointer options, laser pointer. Perfect. Yep, awesome. We'll just step back up one level. Yeah, so the Broken River province is just in here. So there's been a lot of talk about that today. Okay, so yeah, we're close to Kidston, which was 5 million ounces of gold, running at about 0.8 grams per tonne in the end. So the large bulk tonnage, low grade deposits. Woolgar's pulled together about 1.9 million ounces. They might get off the ground in the next little while, and we're sort of interested in this corridor through here. So yeah, it's sort of loosely defined, but there is basically a structure through here that you see in magnetics and in gravity. It's potentially quite a large feature. It tends to concentrate a lot of these Palmer and Kennedy igneous granites, and also has some associations with interesting things going on in the Paleoproterozoic in the Georgetown Inlier, which is mostly this area to the north, but most of our tenure actually sits in Georgetown Inlier / Etheridge province geology. And just to zoom out a bit, you know, one of the really interesting things about this area is looking at the relationship and the connections to Mount Isa and to this sort of southern boundary of the North Australian Craton. There is a pretty prominent lineament that comes up here with a real sinistral offset kind of look to it in this part of the world, and it leads straight up into this area. So we can kind of see it coming up through there. It's pretty clear to me that this is a major feature coming through the area. Again, it has a sinistral component to it, and that becomes kind of relevant when you start to look into detail in these areas up in here. Okay, so zooming in again. So yeah, you can see this lineament coming in through here, and then we've picked up ground here, which is where the Kidston-Woolgar fault zone sort of dips to the south. And it's a little bit hard to see on this image, but this is actually a major sinistral offset on a granite in here, which I believe is a Kennedy Carboniferous Permian granite with some lovely ropey textures. So this is a first vertical derivative magnetic image. And you can see the offsets on some of these lineaments, which are dolerite dikes coming through here, and they change dramatically as you go across some boundary through here, and that's the Woolgar shear zone coming through there. And all of these yellow diamonds are the Woolgar gold fields, and you might wonder why they're sitting over there, and we've picked up all this ground out here. Yeah, just to clarify, here are some of the features that we think are interesting. There's basically this Woolgar fault zone, another fault zone out to the west, and then a sort of east-west trending feature which cross-cuts it with a sort of dextral sense. So yeah, when you look at the radiometrics, it becomes pretty obvious why you get all of those gold occurrences out there. All of this area is under regolith and cover. This is all Carpentaria Basin and regolith of eroding Carpentaria material. And then you've got this beautiful inlier, which is full of radiogenic material, lots of uranium and thorium, potassium, and it's draining out along this river here. What's really interesting to me is that one of these strong features that are cutting off these magnetic dikes cutting through here is actually visible in the radiometrics. So even though this is all undercover, it must be extremely shallow and also potentially reactivated. So you can sort of see that feature. I can toggle back and forward. You can definitely start to get your eye in on it. And the AusAEM data, just really interesting to sort of circle back to that and see that this feature that comes through here and the Woolgar fault zone where it comes under cover here definitely have a response. Here it's a really discrete, deeper conductive anomaly, and here it's more subtle, but there are certainly some features that you can pull out, and this is one of the reasons we pegged the ground, is we see some very interesting conductivity structure in this section.
Can you wrap it up soon, Gordon?
Sure can.
Thank you.
Yep, so just switching over to our northern package, and we've got a bunch of interesting results here from historical reports, some high-grade copper hits from rock chips up to 37% copper, 274 grams per ton silver. And now I'm just going to, if this works, how do I do that? Switch over to QGIS and just show you why going to the company reports and then coming back and looking at, you know, some of the surveys is kind of interesting, because in this particular area, if we look at where we see these high-grade silver results, they actually sit on one side of this fault here. There's some silver hits on the other, but there's actually a really nice low radiometric unit coming through here. So this is a package that's been described as having sort of 3 or 4 units. This isn't really pulled out as a separate unit in the regional mapping, but it's pretty interesting that it correlates with these high silver hits. So this is one of the areas that we'll definitely be chasing up. And this is about where you drill down through the data and then circle back to the big stuff and try to understand how it all works together. I think I'll wrap it up there. Thanks very much.